Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Prespective. We'll be talking about the political situation vis-a-vis political gatherings in the face of the second wave of COVID-19, the impact of whether this wave, while we're riding through it, what about all the political gatherings, all the calls of the opposition, of people getting together, whether SOPs will actually make a difference at this point, whether getting that kind of crowd out, the thousands of people that the opposition maintains will be there. Is it safe to get them together? Is it safe for the opposition at this time to ask that of the people at this time? We'll be talking about all of that. We'll also be talking about the government's efforts to combat the second wave of COVID-19. All of that today on Prespective. I have with me today Javed Jadoon, who's a political analyst. Thank you for joining us today. We'll also be joined by Professor Dr. Ijaz Ahmed Khan, who's an infectious disease specialist, and Ghazala Saifi, who's an M&A with PTI. Thank you for being with us. Javed sir, considering the situation at this time, you know, there's no doubt about where we are as far as the second wave of coronavirus is concerned. At this time, as somebody who's, just as an analyst, how do you feel about this call of the opposition of getting people together, whether they are doing so in the name of the situation of the country, whether they're doing so in the name of the price hike, inflation, anything? Do you think that it justifies calling people to come at this point and gather, thousands of people? Do you think that it's justified at this point?
Thank you, Maruk. I think it's very unfortunate. I would say that it's highly unfortunate that opposition is playing with the health of the people of Pakistan. They don't understand. I think they do understand themselves, but probably because of the selfish political motives, they are not listening to the logic and rationale. That is, to be careful in times of pandemic. And particularly, Maruk, this second wave is definitely more stronger, more severe, more harmful, more damaging than the first one. Because these months, the winter months, are very conducive and they are known as super spreader as well. So gathering so many thousands of people in rallies, in protest rallies, without even observing any SOPs. And of course, in my opinion, it is extremely difficult to observe any SOP when thousands of people get together and there's no social distancing. Only, I think, few people are wearing masks as well. So I think politics can wait. If you are patriotic enough and you have any sympathy with the people of Pakistan whom you claim to represent, and you represent their interests, they are your voters and supporters and party workers. So I think playing with their health is extremely unfortunate.
And also, we've seen with Bilawal Bhutto Zardari also, he's also tweeted that he's tested positive. But he also at the same time said that he will talk to the people, virtually, he will address them. At this point, whether whether the political leaders choose to address their supporters virtually or not, the point is that there will be a crowd of people. The point is, when you have a jalsa, when you have a political gathering, you can't have, there's no point. I mean, how can you follow SOPs in that kind of a crowd is a question for the opposition. And I think that whether it's the PDM leaders, political leaders need to answer this question. When they say that, we will be calling out our people, we will be calling out our supporters, they need to address the question, are SOPs, even if there's any use to follow any kind of SOPs in that kind of environment?
Maruk, it is, I think, the responsibility of the educated segments of the society to educate the rest of the people, excuse me, about the dangers, inherent dangers as far as COVID is concerned. And I strongly believe that the political parties have more responsibility towards the people. And as you already mentioned, the PPP chairperson, co-chairperson has already contracted COVID-19. And I think by now he must be going through what everybody who has contracted has gone through it. So I think realizing that he should be more sympathetic towards the people, and because he would be sitting in his own living room and addressing a large gathering virtually while calling them to come out and get together and exposing them to COVID-19. And despite the fact that government has, I think there's no politics. I don't see any politics on part of the government.
Right.
Because government is very right in warning the people that these are the months where you need to be very careful. You need to observe the social distancing. You need to wear masks. And of course, we have seen some very concrete steps like closing down, shutting down the education institutions from, I think from today. It has already started. And even they have issued SOPs, very strict SOPs for the businesses as well. Marriage halls, they have been asked to hold marriage ceremonies outside in the open. And I think ultimately the Prime Minister has already warned that if situation is not controlled, if government is not able to control or stem the tide, the winter tide, then ultimately government would be forced to go for the total lockdown as well. So I think in order to avoid that total lockdown, I think these are the steps which political parties and the media and the intelligentsia, the educated people, and particularly the medical experts and professionals, they are already warning the people about. And furthermore, I would like to say that still you have a certain amount of conspiracy theories, and those who are spreading conspiracy theories, I think they are not the friends of the people, because it is a very clear and present danger. The COVID is there, it is going to stay with us until and unless we have a vaccine. And so far the facts speak, vaccine won't be available in Pakistan before summers of 2021, because the two main vaccine candidates which have been approved or are in the process of being approved, think those vaccines would be provided to the people of respective countries first, and then for example, Pfizer, excuse me, Pfizer is going to produce 500 million doses of vaccine at the first stage, and ultimately only 250 million people would be administered those doses, because everybody has to receive 2 doses. So I think if you look at the situation holistically, 7 billion people living on planet Earth, and just imagine the amount of vaccine doses would be needed. That means 14 billion doses are needed to administer vaccine to everyone on planet Earth. Right. So how it is possible for a country like Pakistan to have access to vaccine? So before vaccine comes to Pakistan, I think the only thing we can do, or only thing the government can do, the only thing the medical professionals can advise to the people is to observe the SOPs. And those SOPs are very simple, nothing difficult to follow. The first step is to wear mask, and the second stage is to keep a very safe distance, the 6 feet distance. And I think it is very easy to be observed.
I'm going to go to Professor Dr. Ijaz Ahmed. Ji, Ijaz Sahab, before we go on to the SOPs, is it, in your medical opinion, possible to follow the kind of SOPs, whether they're any good, whether they actually will make a difference in the kind of crowd that is being envisaged, in a PDM Jalsa, for example?
I think I would agree with Iqbal Sahab earlier. He's rightly put that with any gathering, whether it's a small or big gathering, you are asking for trouble actually. So I think the large jalsa that has been seen, it sends shivers down my spine when I looked at it. And even ID specialists, infectious disease specialists that we are amazed by the complacency shown by the leaders that we have. And I think you will see the effect a week or 2 weeks down the line, how the cases will rise steeply. Already we are seeing a steep rise of cases across the country. The hospitals are filling up, the ICUs are filling up, the death rates have climbed enormously. And I think keeping a safe distance even within a small gathering is impossible, let alone a large gathering like the PDM that we are talking about.
We're talking about thousands of people getting together in the kind of climate that there is. There is no 6 feet distance. There can't be, and the kind of jalsas that the PDM is talking about, they're saying that, thousands come there. even if hundreds come, let's leave
Yeah,
thousands aside. It is
absolutely.
impossible.
And looking at the some of the jalsas that I've seen, it is a kind of a festivity for them. So people are, of course, they will never wear masks. They will, never be. They will probably embrace each other. They will uh, have a good time, and of course, during that time, it is so impossible for them to follow the SOPs that we are talking about strictly in a strict sense.
Do you
So I
think
think
that they are
I'm,
equipped to deal
I'm
with the
really
aftermath of such a huge, a fallout, worst case scenario, or even the best case scenario of this kind of a political gathering at this time?
absolutely right. So if you remember, there was a gathering in Washington, the White House, and during the when Trump got it, there were how many people there were? Maybe about 100 or 200 people. So even a small gathering like that invites troubles, and even one person who is infected uh, will spread the infections because it's so contagious, it's so transmissible, and infected people will get it sooner, and of course they will spread it further and further. And we know that this
Home, and
thing will
even
multiply.
one of those people will go home, and there is the risk to the elders, that there is the risk that you are putting your whole, a chunk of the population through that risk. There's no denying that.
We are already seeing that actually, multiple families, whole families, just like the first wave, the second wave, we are witnessing families of people who were in fact were spared from the first wave are getting infected right now, and these are large numbers. So I think uh, these gatherings are uh, uh, should not have been held. We are being irresponsible. Uh, they should have be cognizant of the fact that health authorities have already warned it. Public, in the larger public interest, from public health experts that we had, there was a lot of warning not to have that actually. So unfortunately, it was not heard, and they did not follow it. Uh, I hope, and my prayer is that we do not see the consequences of that, but I think you will see that we will have more cases down the line.
Right. Let me go to Ghazala Saifi. Ji, Ghazala Saiba, of course, it would be at this time responsible of the opposition to shut down their political gatherings. Uh, there's no denying that. But if the opposition refuses to do that, shouldn't the government step in and, not allow them to have that kind of political gathering?
Thank you very much for calling me in the program. The thing is that the people now have to be told and mobilized through media and made to understand that this second wave of coronavirus, which is a very serious pandemic coming in on our way, because it's extremely cold in certain parts of Pakistan as well as in other parts of the world. And during this, even if you catch up a flu, you are more vulnerable at any point of getting a flu or a pneumonia that can aggravate situations if you catch up corona at the same time. So, as it is, we do not, as a nation, we do not vaccinate ourselves for flu or pneumonia also. And now getting ready for a jalsa and gathering together thousands and thousands of people, as you say, I may doubt on that. But anyway, even if there are a few hundred, a few thousand, that's something which should not be permissible, which should not be allowed to happen, because that is playing with the health of people. When it comes to SOPs, I must say that Bilawal Zardari has announced about his illness and has told that he'll be taking the jalsa, he'll be giving the speech online. So you want to sit comfortably in your own home and put the rest of the public, the poor people whom you say you're coming out on the streets for, the people who are suffering, who are poor, and for whom you're going to come out and ask for and support them against the government. what kind of a support is this, that you want them to die and get killed and be in a difficult situation by being very seriously ill? I do not understand the logic behind it. And then there is a very major, there's a small occasion, but it's of the engagement of the chairperson of People's Party, of his sister, Bakhtawar's, and there are SOPs. And according to the SOPs, none of the people who have not been tested on COVID, they have to actually send a COVID report that they are
1 day
negative on it,
prior
and
to
then
the
enter the
attendance.
test. So you see, there is a very different. This is a total hypocrisy that is going on. That for yourself, you want to be safe, you want the environment to be safe, you want to follow all the SOPs. When it comes to people, the poor people who are your voters, who are there to support you, maybe not, or who are just eager to come out and listen to the opposition parties, whatever they have asked the people to come in and listen to, will be subjugated. They will be pressurized to be together, and then we'll get into a pandemic situation, which the hospitals also will not be able to protect them from that situation
Right.
and support them in that way, because
Right.
the numbers we see happening will be very large. And I'm really sorry, we will have to take media and into confidence. The media will have to talk to people, messages have to be sent, a lot of people will have to mobilize
But
people
Ghazala,
not
don't
to
you think that at
interact.
this time, regardless of the responsibility of the government should just do, shouldn't the government step in and ban any of these political gatherings? Regardless, okay,
Definitely,
you've appealed to
definitely the
them,
government
you've
should.
tried to
You see,
educate them, you've appealed to them, you've told them that the risks that are involved. But if they want to endanger people like this, then the government will have to stop and step in and ban any kind of gathering. Isn't that true?
well, that is how it should be. But these, what should I name them? These political leaders, so-called political leaders of Pakistan, who are on the other side, who are in the opposition, are playing up with the emotions of people and playing up with the illness, with the disease of corona in a political way. They are politicizing it. So if we as a government, which definitely we will eventually, because we don't want our people to die, we'll have to ask them to at least postpone the Jalsa for at least a month or so, because all the schools are now closed, all the educational institutions are closed down, and we need to understand the need for people to stay away from each other to keep themselves safe from the pandemic, which is coming with a bigger force and with more fierceness.
Like, Javed Sab, when you're asking people to come, and I think that, Ghazala Saifi, she raises a fair point that when we look at this engagement ceremony of Bakhtawar Bhutto Zardari, the certificate that, the corona-free certificate, if I'm not wrong, the test has to be taken 1 day prior to the attendance of the event. There is by coincidence, or whether there is certainly a parallel to be drawn here. On the one hand, you want people to come out and you want people to become a part of your political gathering, and on the other hand, when you are yourself, you're not willing to put your life at risk. So there is a double standard here, which is quite clear and right there in the face of what's happening at this point. And regardless of what the opposition chooses to do at this time, the responsibility, I think, will probably rest with the government at the end of the day for them to just ban it.
Yes, I think I totally agree with you, because rhetorics are not working. Government, I think it is I totally agree with you, it's the prime responsibility of the government of the day to impose those SOPs the way every respective government is doing elsewhere. Even in a country like USA, where people are mostly educated, and we have seen President-elect Joe Biden just ask the people to be careful in Thanksgiving. And there are reports that thousands and thousands of people are traveling. But in a country like Pakistan, where people are not mostly educated, and you really can't expect them to follow the SOPs announced by the government. And when you see the SOPs being violated by the businesses and the people, and you don't impose any deterrent penalties, I think you really can't expect the people to continue following the SOPs which government keeps harping every day, day in and day out. And as far these political rallies are concerned, I once again agree with you that it is about time that government should put down its foot and tell them that, well, as far as health of the people is concerned, it is the prime responsibility of the government to protect the people of Pakistan. And how the government can protect them? They can simply impose a ban, and even Islamabad High Court has already, I think, given its verdict in this regard as well. The government can quote Islamabad High Court's verdict as well, and it has a high moral ground as well, because I think there is no justification as far as opposition political leadership is concerned, because they are doing it for only their own vested interests, very narrow political vested interests. They are trying to sort of bring out the people, and they are trying to project them as the representatives of the people, while on the contrary, they are damaging the interests of the people of Pakistan. They are exposing them to COVID, they are exposing them to the pandemic, and so mercilessly. So I think it's such a cruelty.
बिल्कुल.
I don't see the better sense prevailing
And I think
until
that
and
there are
unless
no two
government comes up
opinions
with
on
some.
this. When you look at it in terms, what is being said on the media also repeatedly, I think the media is doing their part in trying to get this point across that it will not be safe and it will not be right for the opposition at this time to get so many people together. But if the opposition is not going to Ghazala Sahib, I'm going to go to you before I go to Professor Dr. Ijaz. If the opposition is not going to realize this, if the leaders of the PDM are not going to come out and are not going to say that, look, this is an occasion where we realize that the health and safety of people is paramount, and therefore we are choosing to postpone our political gatherings, then it is for the government to take any measures that they feel necessary for the protection of their people.
Well, it is very important for the government to take such measures, and government would definitely, if it comes to that point where the opposition does not understand and will not be sensitive to the need of the people, and they will not stop from holding the jalsas. These jalsas cannot happen during this pandemic time, and the government definitely has to take actions. But the problem here is that the people, we don't want the people also to clash on the streets and without knowing that, you see, because they are mobilizing people in a different way, with a different perspective. Whatever the reason is, the government is going to take action, and government will have to decide and will definitely decide on how to stop so many people coming together to get hurt physically by getting into an illness which sometimes can cause death as well.
Zala, isn't this now the time? I mean, the next Jalsa, if I'm not wrong, is the one in Multan, which, is being so advertised, which they are, regardless of the risks to people, the opposition at this time is asking people to come. They're going full throttle. Like you yourself said, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari has the gal to say that, yes, I have COVID, and I will address from, on TV, but you guys come and expose yourself and take the COVID back. I'm sorry, but that's a reality. Take the COVID back home to other people, and therefore, let's run rampant with this disease, which is what they're saying. If that's the way to put it, regardless of how, whether I'm being brash or that is what's going to happen. There's no other denying, there's no denying the effect of this kind of, calling people. So at this point, maybe now is the time for the Prime Minister, for the government to say that, look, for protection of my people, I have decided that I cannot allow these kind of political gatherings to go on, and maybe after a month you can converge. After 2 months, when we've ridden this wave out, then you can get as many people together. There can be as much of opposition as possible, but the government and the Prime Minister cannot allow his people and their health to be put to this kind of risk at this time.
I fully agree with you and endorse this, and I uh, I suppose that we are going to take this action because this is the needed action, and I agree that the government is and should take this action immediately without even looking into other consequences, because the health of people is of prime importance to the government, and we do not want our people to suffer in any way. So we are hoping that the opposition might understand the difficulty that people will go through to the jalsas, and therefore I think that would be the major decision taken very soon if nothing happens otherwise.
Do that. Ji, Professor Dr. Ijaz Saab, ji, the measures. Let's talk about some of the measures, because even today there was a news that as far as PIMS is concerned, there is so many medical professionals have been affected by COVID-19. Some 100 or so. In the face of this kind of wave, what is, of course, we are talking about taking SOPs, taking the necessary SOPs, making sure that you're wearing a mask, trying your best not to go out in gatherings. But other than that, how does the government propose to deal with the kind of wave that this might turn out to be? Because we're not even in the middle of it yet.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is that if you remember when this started back, initial part, in the initial wave, we were not prepared, or at least we were not prepared for this kind of scenario. Of course, we are much prepared, but we are much better equipped. We are much more trained. We have more knowledge about treatment and diagnostics. But still, the enemy is much bigger than we had anticipated. We have not conquered it. It's still rampant. It affects every segment of the society. It affects everyone, including doctors, nurses, paramedics, health professionals, and general public, of course. Uh, and remember that if your health structure is already weak and you have a staff which is ill, then you are, of course, your system will automatically fall apart, will break down. And that's what we are worried about as health professionals, because somebody has to take care of the sick COVID patients, whether they are in intensive care, whether they are in the emergency room, or whether they are being treated in the wards or even at home. Uh, so I think we have to look at the larger picture, which is that in the larger interest of the health of the people and the safety of the people, everyone, including the government and the people, have to come together to fight this together, because it cannot be done alone. Remember that
Are we
right now,
testing enough people at this point in terms
I
of
don't think so.
testing?
But our capacity, our resources are not great. But people are not testing because we as a nation are afraid of testing. We do not believe in testing, or we do not have the means to test. So there are a lot of factors of low testing that we are seeing in Pakistan. But
There's
considering that,
also, there is,
even last year.
unfortunately, sorry, I'm interrupting you, but there's also this belief, of course, like you also mentioned earlier, that unfortunately during this time, mostly when the winter sets in, we don't always, there's not a culture of being vaccinated against even flu. And in a lot of cases, when you talk about, during this time, people are also confusing, initially at least, the COVID-19 with perhaps flu-like symptoms, and thinking that perhaps they'll ride it out and it's just flu, which is also leading, because then by the end of it you are so you're that far ahead that when you realize that it is in fact COVID, you've infected other people also, and it's too late to have that kind of probably to control it as much.
Correct, and we are right in the middle of a very bad season actually. So we are seeing cold and flus already starting, and it is sometimes difficult to differentiate uh, both. And of course, with flu, with the cold season already set in, people try to congregate more closely, and that may be one reason that we are seeing a steep rise of COVID cases. So I think that as a uh, clinician, health professionals, as healthcare centers, we have to make sure that we have the capacity to test uh, a lot of people. The more, the better, actually, so that you can differentiate and you can at least detect early, and you can take appropriate action to ensure that people do not spread it to others. As you rightly pointed out, because if you are undetected, you are continuing with the virus for at least a week or 2 weeks, and then by the end of your illness, you have already spread it to so many people around yourself, family members, and even your workplaces or in the community.
How protective, of course, there has been some discussion on this, but if you are in fact suffering from the virus and you are wearing a mask, how likely is it that, other people around you are protected?
I think there is certainly a role of wearing a mask and general hygiene measures like hand washing and of course staying from afar. So if you are suffering from any cold or flu or even COVID and you are wearing a mask, the risk of transmission rapidly decreases to a large extent, even up to 90% or 70 to 90% at least. But and if the other person is also wearing a mask who is uninfected, then the risk is so minimal, it is less than 5%. So it depends on uh, if someone is wearing a mask, how far they are, and uh, the mask that they're wearing, is they correctly applied or not. So a lot of factors play into the transmission to others, uh, depending on the wearing of mask or the social distancing that they do. And of course, hand washing, of course, comes in, because even if you are wearing a mask and you touch someone who's got an infection and you then touch your eyes, nose, or throat, and you do not wash it, then of course the wearing a mask alone may not be effective.
Ji, Ghazala, we will know in the next few days, of course, if the opposition doesn't choose to think better of, or doesn't choose to take care of the safety of the people that they're themselves asking to come, what the government will then be forced to do. But in the face of this kind of pandemic, as far as health professionals are concerned, as far as hospitals are concerned, even if the government does its best, even if they are, at this time, whatever best that can be done in a country like ours, we will still need, any kind of support that we can have. Isn't that true?
That is definitely the thing. A lot of support from in the hospitals, but we need a lot of support from the people to understand that this pandemic has come with more severity this time. And if people do not take it seriously in this cold weather, it might take up, we end up with a bigger loss of lives. So, not just about the jalsas. Jalsas are anyway going to be a killer for a lot of people, and to be very bluntly said. And Bilawal Zardari cannot be sitting inside his home and talking about the poor people and their fate. He's there to destroy them for his own or whatever reasons, his own political gains, which he will not gain, and he will lose because the voters and the supporters, if they suffer and they go into the hospitals and their families suffer and they die in numbers, then obviously it's not going to be a very good thing to do. And I remember just about few months ago when SOPs, when the People's Party government, which is more, which has a control due to the 18th Amendment in Sindh, they said that the federal government is not taking serious measures about this pandemic, and more SOPs should be taken. What has happened to the policy that they were following in the initial stages? Why are they justifying it? Their own words, their own, you can pull out other programs that they have spoken in, and all the things they had said before were all about taking SOPs and not meeting people. All that has now diminished somewhere, and something new has emerged, and a new narrative has been built up that the elitists will now sit in their own homes, will be wearing masks and using the sanitizers, and the poor will be standing on the streets with fewer clothes in the cold weather, and would be listening to the odd speeches of these people, these opposition people, and will go into the hospitals, unfortunately, and will suffer. So this is something which is of major concern,
Do you think
which
that
should
this
be
is
of major
not,
concern to all the
Ghazala,
politicians and chiefs
regardless
and
of a time for politics, this is perhaps a time not, this is when the opposition also needs to play a part in unifying the country together. They need to understand that it is not only the opposition's job to criticize the government, but it is also the opposition's job to help the government ensure that that people's
definitely.
safety is perhaps the most important thing, not
So
only for the government but also for the opposition. And this is the right time for them to actually stand behind the government and not oppose
they
it.
have to be responsible. They have to be responsible, and they have to be realistic. They have to support, if not the government, at least the people of the country whom they think that they are going out for and they are doing the jalsas for. So they have to be very critical on what they are planning to do, and very with the other leaders together in the opposition, as well as with the government and with the health people, the doctors and other health organizations. They should sit down and decide what they plan to do is correct or incorrect.
Do you think
That is all that I need to say at this point of time. And the rest assured is that if they continue to do something which will create disaster for our people, we will have to take strict measures on that.
But one thing is certain, that the government cannot allow the Multan Jalsa to go through. Isn't that true? If the opposition at this time does not decide to think better, then the government will have to do it for them.
Well, that will be the thing to do if nothing, if they decide to continue with this, and obviously the government will definitely have to take action against this.
Right, Ji. Javed sir, do you think that perhaps, politically speaking, in your opinion, when things are where they are at this time, even politically speaking, isn't it better for the opposition at this time to demonstrate that kind of dignity, to demonstrate that kind of goodwill, and itself say that, they have decided to think better, rather than for the government to step in at this time and enforce this measure? Politically speaking also, what are your thoughts on this?
I think it wouldn't be appropriate for the government to use force to prevent such protest rallies. There are political means available to the government, and I think government does have several options. The option number one is to call the joint sitting of the parliament, because that is the forum where you can discuss everything, and it can be held virtually as well. So you talk to the opposition. I think if not directly, then through parliament you can talk to them that, well, this is about time that we need to adopt a rational approach. We need to be more flexible, not be rigid as far as the SOPs are concerned regarding the COVID-19. Fighting it is the common cause as far as government is concerned and the opposition is concerned, because the two camps are responsible to protect the people of Pakistan. One is sitting in the government and other is the government in waiting. Government, I think, should abandon the rhetoric, and I wish the government should have set a very shining example of not engaging itself in political activities. But I think it's better late than never that Prime Minister has ultimately decided that government will not engage in any political activity. And as far as opposition is concerned, so far, whatever we have on the ground, available right now is pointing towards the rigid attitude as far as opposition is concerned. And if they
Javed
don't
sir?
listen, I think government, in my opinion, is not going to use force to
Javed sir,
prevent
it's
them.
already the 26th today. The government, if it does not use force, so to speak, do you think that it should then let the Multan Jalsa go forward when, considering the repercussions of that kind of gathering?
Maruk, I think this is my just a personal gut feeling that maybe the opposition is looking for such kind of action on part of the government so that they can sort of become victims, and when government goes there with the law enforcement agencies, prevent the protest rally in Multan, and if there are certain unfortunate incidents over there, opposition will definitely try and cash on that, and government is aware of that. So I don't see government going the whole hog and prevent the Multan rally using force or trying to use the law enforcement agencies. But I think people are now in a better position to judge the two parties, the government and the opposition. So in my opinion, government is definitely on the high moral ground, and opposition being rigid, not listening to the reasoning and logic and rationale, is portraying itself as a kind of a opposition which is not a people-friendly opposition. They are being selfish, they are self-motivated, and they have got their own vested interests, and they are just trying to embarrass the government, nothing else.
Right.
So I think as far as the people are concerned, they are the better judge. Media can educate them. Media can't really force opposition not to hold protest rallies.
Right. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for joining us today, Javed Jadoon Saab, Professor Dr. Ijaz Ahmed Khan, Ghazala Saifi. Thank you for being with us. Whether it is not the right time for the opposition or the government, the point is that the opposition needs at this time to think about what they're asking the people of this country to do. The fact is that if the opposition refuses to do that, then the responsibility of ensuring whether they choose to do this by any means whatsoever, the safety of its people lies with the government. The fact is that there will be nothing wrong for the government at this time to take whatever measures they feel necessary to ensure that the people of this country are safe. And the people at this time to go out in these kind of gatherings, in these kind of jalsas, will not be safe. There are no two opinions on it. There can't be two opinions on it. It is certainly time for the opposition at this time to show that kind of grace and to bow out and say that they have decided to think better fit, considering the health of their people. This is not a time for political show. This is not a time for political one-upmanship, so to speak. This is a time for the leadership of this country to show that they are in fact leaders, whether it is Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, whether it is Maryam Nawaz. It is time for that kind of leadership to emerge, where their education and their political perhaps foresight can be seen by the people. This is not a time for popular politics. This is a time when Bilawal Bhutto Zardari himself is suffering from COVID-19. Maryam Nawaz, and if she is not at this time at risk, her husband certainly is also at this time suffering from COVID-19. For the political leadership at this time to show that they are certainly mature enough to take these kind of decisions in the interest of, in the national interest, is perhaps no better time will come. Let's hope that they can do that. Thank you so much for joining us today on Prespective.